Today was the day. The day that Apisa and the others left for Xianba. Even saying that name sent subtle shivers down Apisa's spine. She had never been to the capital before, much less further than the mountains east of Buka. She had spent her entire life on the western half of the empire. Whenever Rayko or Flara spoke about their distant homes, it was almost as if hearing about fabled, made-up places that really didn't exist in her world. Apisa sat up in bed and her sheets fell to her waist. She yawned as her mind started to twist itself awake from another restful night's slumber. Each and every one of her friends, Nori included, were from farther than she had ever ventured. The more she blinked, the more awake she became, and the more awake she became, the more a strange hollowness started to swirl within her. Of them all, she was the most inexperienced. Well, all that was about to change, because today, Apisa was going to a brand new place she had never been before. Okay, maybe not today, but she was going to start heading there today, at the very least. Apisa got dressed, double-checked her travel bags, and then strapped them to her back. There was no telling how long she and the others would be gone, and the headmaster gave them academic leave to pursue the mysteries of whatever object Flara had found. In addition to her change of clothes and travel money, Apisa also packed a half-dozen scrolls. Each of the scrolls had a different transmutation, self-augmentation spell on them. She was determined to increase the number of tattoos on her thigh. Once she had more, maybe people would stop giving her the arched eyebrow when they compared the number of spells she knew against how many her friends did. Of course, anyone outside the transmutation self-augmentation cohort couldn't quite understand how insanely difficult trying to learn new spells was. When you casted spells, you used half of the spell to physically alter your body, and the other half of the spell to change yourself back. There was a reason that Apisa's cohort was the smallest group between all of the other cohorts. As per their agreement, Apisa would meet the other girls and Nori at their most favorite place, Cake Haven, and then head for the docks from there. Nori had come around last night and told them that he had obtained a ship, but he was quite elusive about any details beyond that. Apisa wondered what sort of ship they would ride. When she rode up from Buka, it was aboard one of the merchant vessels, and Apisa had to work the entire time she was on board. She wouldn't mind working hard like that again, if it secured her passage, but Rayko and Flara weren't really the working type. Apisa smiled to herself as she stepped out through the front gates of the university. The mid-morning air was still a little crisp from the morning, but the sun was almost at its zenith. Nori had told them that the ship was going to leave sometime in the afternoon, so Apisa got the chance to sleep in. While she reveled in the chance to do so whenever she could, it was definitely a luxury she didn't get to savor when she worked on the farm. Her granny would wake her and the rest of the family up before dawn, and they would all be prepared to work until sunset that night. Apisa glanced down at her arms as she moved through the streets. Had life as a university student made her soft? Surely not, right? After all, she had been a farm girl for her entire life, with the exception of 7 years, so it wasn't as if she had totally stepped away from her agrarian roots. Apisa smiled as she wondered to herself, how long would she have to wait for the others? Apisa always arrived places first, which was probably due to her regimented raising. The streets of Jedi were not as densely packed as they would be a couple of hours later. Apisa walked with ease, made it to the Cake Haven, and then moved inside. A sudden sense of sickening filth flared in her stomach. Rayko, Flara, and Nori were seated at a table, and they all looked at her.
There you are! We were wondering when you were going to get here.
Honestly, darling, I thought you would get here before any of us.
Yeah, and here I thought I was doing really good on time.
Oh, you are. It's not like you're late or anything. I was just so full of anxious energy considering where we're going. I couldn't really sleep last night.
Yes, I only just arrived about 10 minutes ago. We've been waiting for you to arrive so that we may finally hear the details of our travel. Mr. Nori has been oddly quiet this morning thus far.
Apisa set her things beside the other large bags belonging to her friends. Apisa sat beside Rayko.
Okay, so I'm here. Tell us, Mr. Nori, what kind of ship are we going on? Is it a nice one, or is it a real piece of junk?
It's a nice ship from what I saw. Okay, before we go to the ship, there's something I have to tell you.
I don't like the tone of your voice. Get the feeling that none of us are going to enjoy what you're about to tell us.
Okay, so let me backtrack for a moment. You remember that time when we sort of stormed the Karaba clan warehouse to free Dr. Kausisti's husband?
Yes.
And you remember how you asked me what I did the night before and I was speaking in hypotheticals, neither confirming or denying the questions you were asking me about the slaughter at the Karaba clan manor?
For a long moment, none of the other girls said anything, and they all stared at Nori with hard eyes. Even Apisa, who usually found the giant man charming, glared at him with grim anticipation. Where was he going with this? What did this have to do with their ship ride to Xianba? Something gross started to bubble in the bottom of Apisa's stomach.
So, you're confirming it now?
Yes, I am. I stormed their base and took out their entire clan. You already know why. What you don't know is who the other person I fought with is.
Does this other person have to do with our ship passage?
Yeah. The other person's name is Alfana Luxi, and she fought to get inside the Karaba clan manor as well. She's a very skilled swordswoman, and I honestly don't know if I would have succeeded without her help.
Wow, I guess it's a good thing she was there too. Why was she trying to get inside the base?
As it turns out, Luxi is a ship captain, and she was trying to get inside because the clan had taken several of her crewmates hostage. It's her ship we're going on.
Oh! So she is letting us ride to Xianba for free because you saved her crewmen?
No, we do have to pay her. And that's why I've been quiet all morning. I was trying to figure out exactly how to tell you.
Tell us what? And how much is she wanting for payment?
30,000.
Apisa's mouth fell ajar, and the moisture immediately evaporated. Her eyes went unfocused for a moment.
30,000? That's insane! Why is it so much?
Well, you see, there's this thing called the Great Kappa Migration, and
Oh! That makes a lot more sense. Still, 30,000 is very high.
Wait, you three know about the Great Kappa Migration?
Well, duh. I mean, I'm from this area, so I'm used to it every year.
And Rayko and I have been going here for the last 7 years. The first time I experienced it was pretty fascinating, actually.
I'm glad that you enjoyed it. Now, back to the matter of hand. 30,000 is a lot of coin. How much is this new captain friend of yours wanting up front?
Actually, she's going to let us pay her once we reach Xianba.
Really? But why? The Great Kappa Migration is dangerous. Why is she allowing us to... She doesn't know, does she?
Nori averted his eyes, and a moment later Flara covered her mouth with her hand. An instant white-hot fury ignited in Apisa's heart, and it was obviously shared by Rayko. Rayko was the first to act, though. She reached forward and grabbed Nori by the front of his shirt.
You told her?
No, of course not.
Then explain.
When I went to fight the entire clan, I was wearing my special armor under my clothes. One of the thugs slashed my stomach or something, and the colors of my armor were not only seen by this captain, but by the main clan boss. Who is dead, by the way. It's okay. The captain can be trusted.
And how do you know that?
Because I know her secret as well.
Oh? And what is her secret?
She's a smuggler.
A what?
A smuggler. It means that she...
Rayko pushed Nori back and let go of his shirt, but she beamed an acid-filled expression at him.
I know what a smuggler is. Idiot! You are telling us that not only does this captain know about our secret, but she's a criminal as well? You secured us passage on a smuggler ship. Oh, what a bang-up job you did, Mr. Nori. Well done.
Now hold on. There is a silver lining here.
Really? I would love to hear something good, because all of what you just told me is really just horrid.
While technically the captain does know about me being, you know, what I am, what she doesn't know is which one of you is the person connected to me. We could just pretend it's one of the others instead.
The tightness in Apisa's stomach softened, and she glanced at her best friends. Both Rayko's and Flara's eyes widened ever so slightly.
That's actually a good point, and one I think we can use to our advantage. I feel bad for asking, but would one of you be willing to pretend?
Apisa opened her mouth to speak.
Of course, darling. However, we all know which of us two should actually be the one to pretend, as it were.
And what's that supposed to mean? Are you trying to say I'm not princessy?
Oh, Apisa, let us be honest here. If this captain knows about Nori, then what sort of person do you think she's going to expect to be connected to him? You are an absolute gem, but you are also clearly from Buka. Your skin is tanned from years of working in the fields, you have farmer thighs, calves, and arms, and your manner of speech...
What's wrong with the way I talk?
It is not the sort of sophistication that one expects from nobility, much less royalty.
To be fair, I don't quite sound like a princess. I'm super quiet all the time, and I avoid contact with others all the time. Apisa is very friendly, and she could easily be a princess of the people.
Let me ask you, Flara, is the way that your older sisters communicate more similar to Apisa or myself?
I suppose they do speak a little more eloquently, but it doesn't mean Apisa doesn't.
It's fine. I understand what Rayko is saying, and I agree with her, I guess.
If it makes you feel any better, you're more like the noble women of Onista. I mean, even the most wealthy ones have a more pragmatic and practical way of speaking. To be honest, being around you reminds me of home. It's nice.
A sudden and slight heat fluttered in Apisa's cheeks, and she couldn't help but smile broadly. However, both Rayko and Flara flashed her telling glances. Apisa averted her eyes from Nori as her cheeks started to redden as well.
Sorry if that sounded weird.
We shall have to revisit this later, yes, Flara?
Yes, I really think we should.
Okay, great. So we're pretending that Rayko is the you-know-what. Awesome. Let's head to the boat.
Apisa got up from the table, but she felt the intensity in her cheeks ignite hotter as her two best friends giggled together. Yes, there would be a future conversation, one in which that would make Apisa feel way more goofy than she felt right then and there. They left the Cake Haven within a matter of minutes, heading toward the docks. Rayko and Nori walked side by side, while Apisa and Flara moved behind. When they arrived at the docks, Nori led them to a ship towards the very end. The ship had 3 sails, one of which was white and 2 smaller ones that were black. A painted, grinning panda was on the front of the ship too. Sailors moved aboard the vessel in a rush, while a rather tall woman with brown hair and brown eyes shouted orders at them. As soon as the woman noticed the group, she started to walk down the gangplank. The woman had a slender sword at her hip, and she walked with one hand placed on the hilt, and the other swaying beside her. Nori and Rayko moved closer to the captain, while Apisa and Flara stood back. Apisa glanced behind them briefly before placing herself in front of Flara, even if it was only by a single step. The captain smiled widely at them, and it was the sort of troublemaker grin that Apisa often seen on her cousins' faces.
Well, well, well. It looks like you arrived at last. Greetings. My name is Captain Alphina Luxie, and this is my luxury passenger vessel, the Grinning Panda.
Oh, it really is a lovely ship. I especially like the painted panda on the front. Mr. Nori has told me about you and about the arrangement for our travel.
Oh, did he? What's your name, miss?
Yes, he did indeed. My name is Rayko, and these are my two best friends in the world, Apisa and Flara.
Hi. I'm Apisa, by the way. This is Flara.
Luxie made it to the bottom of the gangplank and stopped when she stood in front of Nori and Rayko.
So these are your companions, Nori? So Miss Rayko here is the Imperial Princess?
Apisa glanced around nervously once more, and she rubbed her thumbs against the interior of her fingers. Nori stared directly into Luxie's eyes, and even Rayko's expression was so, well, convincing. She couldn't see how Flara reacted, but she had to have faith that Flara also played it cool. Rather than say anything herself, Apisa just smiled.
Yes, she is.
Bullshit. Nice try.
Luxie brushed past Rayko and Nori, despite their protests. She stopped right in front of Apisa and then grinned wider.
Excuse me?
Before Apisa could do or say anything in response, Luxie stepped around her and wrapped an arm around Flara's shoulders. Flara was pulled into a side hug, and Luxie leaned in a little closer to her. Flara shrank a little in her grasp, and she winced while she beamed the most uncomfortable smile.
You are very lucky to have Nori looking out for you.
For me? Don't you mean Rayko? I'm just a friend and
Oh, come now, princess. It's obvious that Rayko is not the princess.
And what do you mean by that? I am the one whom Nori serves. What proof do you have to counter my claim?
For one, you have an accent from Tolfgas. I've been there many times over the years, and I know it well enough to know that you're not a member of the royal family. Secondly, you approached me first, which might have fooled other people, but me? I've built a career around bluffs. Thirdly,
Luxie gestured toward Apisa.
the blonde one subtly positioned herself in front of Flara when you all approached. When I mentioned Imperial Princess, she was the one who tensed up. All of this aggravation is unneeded. I promise that I'm going to keep your secret safe, okay, Miss Flara? I promise I'm going to get you to Xathien safely, for the specified price. And I promise none of my crew are going to bother you or your friends. You can trust me, okay?
Oh, okay.
Sorry, everyone. I'm the one who messed up.
Don't worry about it, Buka girl. I knew you weren't the princess either. Buka people are some of the best people I've ever done business with, too.
Luxie freed Flara from her grasp, and she positioned herself between Nori and Rayko.
Now that we got that out of the way, let me say this again. Greetings. My name is Captain Alphina Luxie, and this is my luxury passenger vessel, the Grinning Panda. I'm sure Nori told you I'm a smuggler, right?
He did indeed. I am curious. What is it that you smuggle exactly?
The only thing you all need to worry your pretty little heads about is enjoying the ride and staying safe during the Great Kappa migration. Now, to accommodate such honored guests, we have cleared out one of our smaller cargo holds so that you might have your own private room to set up hammocks. Don't worry, my crewman will set it up for you. Nori will have to sleep with the rest of my crew. I hope that's not a problem, big guy.
No, not at all. In all honesty, it's much better than the accommodations that I received on my last ship ride.
We'll travel along the river, keeping an eye out for the pods of Kappa that swim the waters. Generally, the Kappa are only active during the day, so we'll see them coming if we have any trouble. We'll stop at ports along the way to Xathien, loading and offloading perfectly legal cargo. The entire trip should take a little over a week, I think. Do any of you have any questions or concerns?
No one voiced any questions or concerns, and so Luxie gestured to the gangplank.
Okay then, please watch your step as you walk up the gangplank. I have crewmen on board that will help you with your stuff. Let's start this journey already, shall we?
The night sky glistened above Nori as he stepped out onto the dock of the Grinning Panda. He had awoken minutes before, shaken awake by a fleeting nightmare. In his hellish dream, a mysterious figure had landed on the ship at night, and it was killing Flara and her friends. When he sat up in the hammock, the only sounds he heard were the collective snoring of the day shift sailors. Silently, Nori had collected his Tetsubo and his loot case, and he headed for the deck. He poked his head into the small cargo hold where Flara and the others slept. Nori's heart steadied a little slower when he saw them nestled in their hammocks. Of the three, Rayko was the only one snoring. As soon as Nori stepped out onto the deck, someone whispered at him.
Hey, can't sleep, big guy?
Nori stood at the top of the stairs that led below deck, which was about 10 feet or so from the main mast. The person speaking was on the raised platform toward the back of the ship. A pair of stairs went on either side of the ship, leading to the platform. The sailor who spoke gently held the handle of the rudder on the back of the vessel. Directly in front of Nori, below the platform, was a set of double doors. They were closed at the moment. Nori walked up to the platform.
I had a really graphic dream and I wanted to clear my head. Do you think the captain would mind if I played a little soft music at the front of the ship?
Hey, it shouldn't be a problem. You're carrying a lute and not a drum, right?
Yeah, it's just a lute.
I have no problem with it then. Just bear in mind that the captain's quarters are beneath me, so make sure not to wake her up.
Nori gave the man a nod, and then headed to the opposite end of the vessel. He sat down against the smaller mast, placing his back against it. The night sky spread in front of Nori, and he took in a deep breath. He placed his Tetsubo right behind him, just in case, and then he opened his lute case. With all the care of handling a lover, Nori gently took out his lute. For a long moment, he just sat there, listening to the sounds of the water passing around the ship and the sound of the night breeze flowing freely. He closed his eyes and let his fingers dance across the strings. Pleasant notes danced on the air, and Nori's restless soul started to ease ever so slightly. He played an old Onistan lullaby, and its hollowed tune seemed to impress even the night, for the wind slowed down ever so slightly. As soon as he finished the first song, he played a second, then a third.
Who would have guessed that the battle-hardened Onistan Chutar could play such beautiful music?
Nori stopped and then glanced back to Luxie, who had moved up to where he sat. He stopped and started to get up.
Oh, don't stop on my account. I could use some soothing music myself. Please, play for me.
Luxie sat across from Nori, against the edge of the ship. She had a large flask in her hands. Her sword wasn't at her side. Luxie sipped from the flask and then nodded.
Please.
Nori strummed the lute once more and played several more songs. The captain just sat there watching him at times, and then staring off into nothing in particular at others. Her mouth formed a constant smile, and it was the sort of smile that sent warm vibrations throughout Nori's core. When Nori stopped, Luxie wiggled her flask at him.
Want some? I'm certain it will help you sleep.
What is it?
It's delicious, that's what. Just take a swig.
She tossed Nori the flask, and he caught it in his right hand. There was a brief moment of hesitation coupled with unblinking eye contact between he and the captain. Nori brought it to his lips, and then dipped his head back. Liquid hit his tongue, and then flowed down his throat. A powerful initial taste slapped at his taste buds, followed by a subtle cinnamon aftertaste. His eyes widened.
Wait, is this
Yep, Onistan Ale. My father used to love this stuff, and I acquired a taste for it when I was growing up.
Wow. I forgot what it tasted like. My mother used to give me some when I was a kid, when my father wasn't looking.
Aren't parents grand? So, how long has it been since you've been home?
8 years. I just finished my training recently.
So how did it happen anyway? Onistans hardly ever leave Onista, unless they're thugs and criminals. You don't seem like most of the Onistans I've met on the river.
Nori took another swig of the flask, which earned a happy squeal from the captain. He threw it back to her.
I didn't have a choice. I was conscripted to the order, and that was that. I've heard about the others who supposedly exist in the world. I've not ever met another Onistan outside of home. They weren't in Xianba, nor were they in Jedi.
You'd have to venture to the east coast near Tolfulgas and other cities east of the Imperial capital to find most of the rabble who fled Onista. A few found their way further west down the river. So tell me, Onistan, if you could have had any other life, What would it be?
Aside from being a bodyguard, I would have joined the militia and served with my mother, and perhaps pursued playing the lute in various taverns and pubs. If I would not have been forced into joining the Chutar Corps, I would probably have been married and saddled with at least a couple of children of my own.
How long is the Chutar gig anyway? Is it a life sentence?
It's not for life. After 20 years, I can retire and get a pension. Once I do, I'll probably return home and start my life then.
You have to wait 19 more years before you can live the life you want? That's horrible. No offense, but you were seriously screwed.
It's my life. It's not so terrible. Besides, I'm Onistan, and Onistans and...
Onistans endure, no matter what.
That's right. How did you know?
I've encountered my fair share of Onistans on the river.
And where are you from?
Me? I'm from Gahoda.
Gahoda? I've heard people mention it, but I don't know what kind of place it is.
You know, that's actually quite refreshing. Gahoda is renowned and infamous for its legacy of piracy.
Piracy? You mean like boarding ships, stealing stuff, and then killing people?
Yes to the first two, and it depends on the last one. Not all pirates are bloodthirsty. Some are honorable and only kill if the situation calls for it. In the middle of a raid, this situation calls for it. But the pirates I know don't just kill people for the sake of it.
You know pirates?
I know a lot of people.
Are they going to be a problem for us?
They shouldn't be. The only problem we have to worry about are the Kappa. Play me one more song and then let's go to bed. Yes?
Bed?
For a moment, Luxie simply gaped at him with a raised eyebrow. Then she laughed. She laughed so hard that she had to cover her mouth with her hand, and she averted her eyes from Nori.
Sorry, that was a dumb question. Of course, you mean separate hammocks.
Luxie's finger pressed against Nori's lips. In the flurry of him trying to explain himself, the captain had crawled across the distance between them. Her eyes stared into his. She was only within arm's length with him, and yet Nori smelled her scent, felt the heat of her breath on his skin, and he felt the softness of her finger on his lips.
Play another song for me, okay?
Nori ended up playing 3 more songs. Luxie didn't retreat back to where she had been sitting, but positioned herself within 1.5 feet of Nori. Her smile never fell, and the fire in Nori's chest never diminished. The river parted before the front of the ship, and the beautiful sound of the water rushing by was just as wonderful as it had been last night. However, unlike last night, Nori was not soothed. He stood at the very front with his Tetsubo leaning on one shoulder, and his free hand gripping the railing of the ship. His eyes darted from the surface of the wide river to the sides and back to the center again.
Are you okay, Mr. Nori?
Nori jumped a little, and then he glanced back to see Apisa at his side. She peered out into the river like he was moments before, and a frown was on her face.
You look really worried.
That's because I am worried. The situation could easily go very badly, but there's no going around it. Miss Flara wants to get the object back to the capital, so I'm happy to do her will. It's just...
Just what?
You know, theoretically, a Chutar's life is supposed to be boring with only the occasional episode of excitement. When I was assigned to work with Miss Flara, I was told she was super quiet and demure, and to expect a long campaign of silent tailing and isolation. This is not what I expected.
I'm sorry that we constantly force you to protect us in dangerous situations.
Constantly?
Well, if it makes you feel any better, I'm really glad you're here.
Really? You don't see me as unneeded anymore?
Apisa gave a little chuckle, and then she tucked some loose strand of her hair behind one of her ears.
Not anymore. You've proven yourself to be an awesome friend, and you've gotten us out of some pretty sketchy situations. I'm really glad I met you, and I hope we've not made you miserable.
I'm really glad I met you all too, to be honest, even though you 3 stress me out a lot. This whole experience has been a lot more enjoyable than what I thought it was going to be. I'll have a bunch of stories to tell my family when I get home.
Apisa leaned over the front railing of the ship and gazed outward longingly.
So, how long do you have to do the whole Chutar thing anyway?
19 more years.
19 more? By Saito's grace, that's a long time.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
So what are you going to do when you're done?
Probably go back to Onista and see what sort of life I can carve out of my future.
That sounds nice. I hope you can have a lot of happy memories when you... Hey, Nori? Do you see that in the water, or am I imagining things?
Nori followed her line of sight. Slivers of green floated on the surface of the river, perhaps about 300 feet or so. It looked like a bunch of some kind of moss or other plant matter, and there had to have been a dozen little individual pieces. A sudden tingling started to flare inside the back of Nori's throat.
I see it, but I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, it's going against the current.
He turned around and waved his arms at Luxie, who was on the far side of the ship where the level of the rudder was located. It took a moment for her to see it, but her eyes widened when she did. Like ripples on a pond, the other sailors turned their attention to Nori, and they too became quite apprehensive. Luxie ran the length of the ship, and the sailors all trailed after her, with the exception of the man operating the rudder. Luxie stepped up beside him and switched her gazes between Nori and Apisa.
What is it? Do you see something?
I think so. There.
Nori pointed out in the distance, and Luxie peered over the front of the ship. Her crew all crowded around her and looked as well, from the curling of their lips and the dancing in their eyes. It told Nori all he needed to know.
We've run into a pod. They haven't seen us yet. Maybe if we slow down, we can stay out of their attention.
The cluster of leaves seemed to slow in the water, and then they drifted closer to the front of the ship. A sense of panic slithered through the crew, and even Luxie grimaced.
It looks like they're getting closer.
Well, no shit, they're getting closer. Blondie, get below deck with your friends where it's safe. You, big guy, are you wanting to retreat below deck too, or do you want to have some real fun?
Hey, I'm not helpless. I can do stuff too.
I'm not saying you're helpless, but it's going to get really clustered on the deck. And I'd rather have experienced fighters on the deck to keep those bastards off of us. Please, go below deck and be prepared to repel any of the Kappa if they get down there. Onistan, are you fighting or not?
Yeah, I am.
Great. Stay up here and knock anything that comes on board. Battle stations! We're going to have company!
Apisa only gave one last whimpering look before she ran toward the stairs that led below deck. The rest of the crew scrambled and drew their weapons, ultimately positioning themselves about a foot from the edge of the railing. Luxie ran to the raised platform where the rudder was, and her sword was drawn.
Listen up. I know this is scary, but we can get through this. Support each other, wound them, and drive them back into the water. Stay strong, my lads. There's a fortune waiting for us in Cienba.
Flara, Rayko, and Apisa came up from the stairs, but Luxie pointed her blade at them from the top of the platform.
No, you three go back below deck. Now! If you're up here where it's dangerous, then neither Nori or I will be able to fight to our full skill. Go!
The three women only gaped at Luxie a moment longer before they turned their attention to Nori. Similarly, they only gazed at him briefly before heading below deck. A small smile crept on Nori's face, and he glanced toward the captain at the other end of the ship. Luxie's return expression was stern, as if she were carved from stone. Nori turned around to face the river. He no longer saw the slivers of green that had been on the river before. A dreaded coldness frosted his insides, and yet Nori found some comfort in it. Now wasn't the time for feelings or overthinking. This was the time for endurance, instinct, and survival. He leveled his Tetsubo in front of him and took several deep breaths. Starting in this moment, and until they were safe again, there wasn't a Flara, Apisa, or Rayko. There wasn't a Luxie or a back half of the Grinning Panda. The only thing that existed was this small patch of wood and the scenery before him. This patch belonged to Nori, and he would destroy anyone or anything that seeked to enter his realm. Something splashed in the water, or perhaps emerged from it, judging from the sound. So, it was beginning. Nori tightened the grip on his Tetsubo and he focused his mind on a singular purpose. That purpose: strike out and connect. A ghastly face rose up from the edge of the boat. It had the face of a large snapping turtle with what appeared to be a large leafy bowl resting on its head. Water filled the interior of the bowl. Nori slammed his Tetsubo against the side of its face, and the monster went flying back into the river. 2 other Kappa heads emerged from the edge of the railing, and their scaly, clawed hands reached over as well. Nori's Tetsubo rose, and then crushed one of the Kappa's hands. The bones in the creature's hands snapped like twigs, and it retracted it. Anguish covered its face. He clipped its head and then rammed the end of his Tetsubo into the other Kappa's chest as it had pulled itself up higher, preparing to vault onto the deck beside him. The Kappa's chest was covered in a sort of undershell, not unlike a turtle. Something landed on the wood behind him, and so Nori turned around. A Kappa stood before him, perhaps no larger than Apisa. It had a large brown shell on its back, and the underside of its shell, consisting of its chest, was a lighter yellow hue. Its feet and hands were webbed, and also had sharp claws on the ends of their digits. The Kappa's beak formed an angry scowl, and it screeched out angrily. From the corner of Nori's eye, he noticed several other Kappa had boarded as well. He dismissed it from his mind, though, and he swung his war club at the Kappa. One of the Kappa tried to duck, but Nori still clipped it in the arm. As soon as his Tetsubo struck, the structure of the arm crumpled into mesh. More sounds echoed behind him, signs that more of the Kappas had made it on board. Nori rammed his shoulder into the injured Kappa, and then knocked him over the rail. It splashed in the water, and Nori peered over the side. 4 Kappas were trying to crawl up the side of the vessel, and they angrily hissed at Nori as their eyes met. When Nori whirled back around, 3 Kappas had advanced on him. They swiped their clawed hands at him, but Nori blocked their attempts with his Tetsubo. He used his Onistan strength to drive them back, and he smashed their arms, faces, and shoulders when he could. Even with gaining injury, the Kappas still attacked the best they could. Whatever damage Nori had inflicted upon them, it slowly started to repair itself. The water within the top of the Kappa's leaf bowls all glowed with a faint but noticeable hue. More Kappas climbed aboard from behind Nori. He swung his Tetsubo in wide arcs and slapped the Kappas to the ground. No matter how hard Nori struck them, they always managed at great effort to keep their heads upright. Nori kicked out, arched his Tetsubo upward, and then brought it down over and over. 5 Kappas clustered closer to Nori, and he drove them back, sometimes even over the edge of the railing. However, they would return moments later, with even more rage at being dunked in the river. Madness danced in their eyes. Some of the Kappa's leafy bowls had more water in them than others. Nori crushed the leg of one of the Kappas, and it dropped to a knee. He moved beyond the claw swipes of another Kappa, but he watched the one he had injured. The Kappa's bowl was empty, and its eyes started to bulge from its turtle face, panicked. A moment later, it tossed itself back into the river. One of the Kappas grabbed Nori's arm and tried to bite into his bicep. Slight pain ignited his senses, but he sidekicked the Kappa in the chest, creating the distance between him and the monster, but also stopping it before it could bite down all the way. Blood oozed from his wound. Another Kappa pulled itself back into view and vaulted over the railing. Was this the same Kappa who had thrown itself over before? Maybe, but all the Kappas looked alike. Nori uppercutted one of the Kappas, and its head dipped back. Water spilled from its bowl, and the Kappa's eyes widened. Immediately, it tossed itself over the edge of the railing. It returned a moment later. Screams of the injured and scared sailors resonated behind him. Luxie shouted at her men to continue, but there was desperation in her voice. Nori's heart thundered in his ears. A sudden idea came to mind, and then it evolved into an absolute insane notion. However, in between crushing the limbs of the Kappas and avoiding getting his face torn open via claw swipes, the insane notion grew into something far more insistent. For this insane plan to work, Nori would need the right opening. He dodged about, countered, and then led the Kappa to where he needed them to go. Surely one of them would do what he desperately hoped they would. Nori kept his back to the railing, and he lowered one of the Kappa into the center of the space between the front edge of the ship and the smaller front mast. As soon as it lunged for him, Nori stopped it in place with his Tetsubo, and then he swept its legs out from under it. It landed on its turtle back, and all of its water spilled out onto the deck. The fallen Kappa gasped wildly, and it tried to get back up. Its friends attempted to get to its rescue, but Nori planted one of his sandals on its chest and kept swinging his war club to keep the others at bay. The other Kappa snarled and slashed at him, but Nori ensured their distance. Meanwhile, the fallen Kappa was gasping wildly. Its eyes bulged and it wiggled its head frantically. This was it, the moment when he would indulge his insanity. Nori dropped his Tetsubo and then reached down for the Kappa. As soon as he did, its comrades threw themselves at Nori. They dug their claws into his skin and bit down upon his arms and legs as he hoisted the Kappa above his head. Pain flowed into every nerve ending, and yet Nori endured. He tossed the Kappa through the air, over the railing, and into the river. The other Kappas watched its trajectory with their eyes, and during their comrades' flight, they stopped biting and digging in their claws. As soon as they heard the splash, they stopped their attacks, and they stepped back away from Nori.
We don't want to fight you! We just want to go in peace!
The Kappas all glared at Nori, and then looked at one another with a strange sort of silent communication. When they turned back to Nori, Nori spoke again.
Please.
One of the Kappas stepped closer to Nori, opened its mouth, and then it gave off a loud screech. There were several odd clicks and knocks within the Kappa's screech, and Nori closed his eyes for a moment, flinching at the sheer volume and pitch of its sound. When Nori opened his eyes, the Kappas were throwing themselves back over the railing.
They're leaving! By Saito's grace, they're leaving!
Nori turned his attention to the rest of the ship. Many of the sailors were injured in some way, bleeding from savage-looking wounds, but none were dead. Luxie stood on the other platform, and she stared at Nori with an amusing and perplexed look. Constant throbbing radiated on Nori's skin, coming from the many bite and claw marks he carried. They would make some excellent scars. He turned his attention back to the front of the vessel, toward the river. The massive pod of leafy pads flowed together, going faster than the Grinning Panda, increasing the distance rapidly. An unexpected rumbling rippled in Nori's throat, and he began laughing.